And welcome back to Thursday night coding live streams. It's been a while. I mean, it's been a week. Apologies I couldn't make it last week, but I am back. And yeah, very warm welcome to you all. So today I thought I would do something a little bit different. So let me just get this open. I'll explain what I'm thinking about. You see, TechnoCamps have a couple of new projects, new initiatives coming your way after half term. And, well, in the TechnoCamps office, we like to work together and work on different projects to, promote these things. And one thing I'm going to do today is I am going to make a game to promote one of these projects. What project am I promoting? Well, over on this link here, we have half-term game development sessions. These are virtual sessions taking place via Zoom, and it's just an excellent opportunity over half-term to get to know your way around how do you design games. We've got a beginner session and an advanced session. You can do one or the other or both. It's up to you. You don't need to have done the beginner session to do the advanced session, because the beginner session covers a lot of MakeCode Arcade, which, if you're familiar with, you can jump straight into the advanced one and go for the 3GS editor. So that's one thing we're doing, and I thought, yeah, to get the word out about this, I'm going to make a little game to kind of entice people in, show off the kind of thing that they'll be doing. And for that, I will be making a more advanced MakeCode Arcade game than we've looked at in the past. So, I'm going to cover a lot of features today, a lot of different advanced ways of doing things. You know, if you've seen them before, that's fine. Stay tuned, because I'll be going through lots of different ones and I'll be putting them all into one game together. So it's sort of a medley of lots of different techniques that are a bit more than you're used to with MakeCode Arcade. So before I get started on that, brief announcement. Another of the projects I talked about was the TechnoClubs that we are launching after half term. These begin 2nd of November, and they are an excellent opportunity to get stuck into a real good project. Should I reveal what we're doing? No, I'm not going to reveal it. But the kind of projects we'll be doing in TechnoClub, there might be a little bit of Minecraft modding. There might be a little bit of special effects. All sorts. It's a real varied program of things that we might be getting along and doing in a TechnoClub. So if you go to this website that I'm putting in chat, you can sign up for those. Anyway, that's enough me advertising and going on a bit too long. Let's get down to actually making a fun little MakeCode Arcade project. So head along to arcade.makecode.com, and I'm going to click New Project, and this is going to be Show Off New Stuff. Terrible name. So for this, I'm going to be moving quite fast, because this is more of a demonstration than a step-by-step how-to. But, if you see a feature that you like, it's just a little bit of a nudge in the right direction for if you want to incorporate this into your own games. So let's get rid of the simulator for now. The first thing I'm going to do is, well, we're doing advanced MakeCode Arcade, so let's go to the advanced tab, and I'm going to add an extension. So one big gripes I have with MakeCode Arcade is it's very hard to animate stuff. You know, when we animate stuff, we have to keep adding sprite after sprite after sprite after image after image after image. It just takes too long. Luckily, if we go to extensions in the advanced tab, we get a load of extensions. And these are fun little extras. That might make it a little bit more easy to do certain stuff. Like you've got one for saving settings. You've got one for adding timers. You've got one for status bars. I'm going to add the animation library. And if we look in the bar on the left, we'll see we've got an extra menu. And that's the animation menu. So we can now animate our sprites to give them a little bit extra life. But I'm not going to do that just yet, because what's the use of animating a sprite if we don't have a sprite to animate? So let's create one. Let's go sprites, and I'm going to grab set my sprite. And of course, my sprite's a terrible name. Let's rename that. This is going to be my player sprite. Notice I call it player sprite, and there's a reason for it. If I just call it player and click OK, it warns me that something called player already exists. And that's because that refers to this little drop-down menu here. Player is a reserved name. It's already used in the code behind the scenes of MakeCode. So let's rename that something that's not player. Let's call it player sprite. And again, we're going to do a little bit of our editing. You can draw something nice. This is, because we are doing animation, this is going to be the sort of default still image of our character. I one that doesn't move, doesn't do anything. And usually that means a character that kind of almost faces the camera. So I could draw a little face, not in pink, you know, whatever colour. Do a little, oh, I forget they start from the centre. You know, I could do all that, but just for the sake of ease and time, I'm just gonna load up one from the gallery. Let's go for what's this one called? Hero Walk Front. There we are. Now we're not going to see very much of that sprite because we're going to be animating that. So let's have a look at what our sprite is doing so far. At the moment, our sprite is just sort of hanging out in the middle of the screen, doing absolute nout. So let's add some movement in. Okay, let's go on controller. On we don't want A button pressed, we want left button pressed. We want him to move left. So let's do that. Let's go sprites and letters. Now, usually when I talk about velocity, you know, we've done a lot of MakeCode Arcade stuff on this stream. Usually when I talk about velocity, I use this one here in sprites, the set velocity to Vx Vy. We're not going to do that today. And the reason why is we're going to be adding in some gravity and some platforming action. And when you couple that with moving both the X velocity and the Y velocity at the same time, you could end up with some really glitchy stuff. So instead we just want to change one of these at a time, just the X velocity. So I'm not going to use this bar, I'm going to use the set my sprite X to 0. And of course it's not my sprite, we're going to change that to player sprite. We don't want to change the sprite's X position, we want to change the sprite's X velocity. And this is going left, so left is minus. So minus, and how much? Let's move quite slowly to start off with. Let's go minus 50. Okay, so with those in place, once the simulator loads, come on, there we are. I press left, and there my sprite goes sliding off the screen into oblivion. Okay, let's clear that up a bit. Let's actually make that look good. At the moment he was doing a cha-cha slide left. We don't really want that. We want to use the animations. So I am going to go to the animation tab. For those that have just joined, I got animations by going to extensions. But in the animation tab, the very first one, the animate my sprite, frames, a series of frames, how many milliseconds between each frame, and whether you want it to loop or not. We want this one. Because we want to animate our character going left. And we're not going to animate my sprite, we're going to animate the player sprite. And it's inside this frames oval that we design our frames of animation. So, what we have here is we have our one singular frame. So if I were to do a smiley face just as an example, we can see that's what our sprite looks like. But if I click plus, then we've just added a second frame. And I could copy that, or I could delete it, or I could click for a new frame again. And so on. And, you know, I got a little... Oh, that's terrible. I got a little animation going on. So we start happy, we go to slightly worried, then we go to sad, then we go to miserable, then we go to really sad, and so on. And we can actually see this animation in action. In the top right, there's a play button. If I click play, it gives us a little preview of the animation, and we can speed that up by changing that number to a 1. No, 1 is too fast for it. Let's try 100 instead. There we are. So, I could draw all that out, but again, just not enough time today. I'm feeling lazy. So instead, I'm going to go to the gallery, and I'm just going to load up one of the ones that's already made for us. So, we want the player walking left. So let's find one of these characters walking left. Okay, so we've got this one here, which is, if you hover over it, it's hero walk side left 1. Okay, that's exactly what we want. It's the first frame. And if we click plus, we can then go and load up the next one along, which is hero walk side left 2. And click plus again for our third frame. Let's go to gallery. You can go to hero walk side left 3. We can click plus again. We can go gallery, and finally hero walk side left 4. Now when I preview this in the top right, so we've got a nice little walking animation. Now, back in the day before MakeCode had the animation extension, you had to do this manually by changing every image of the sprite every few milliseconds. It was really painful and annoying. So I'm glad this extension exists. Okay, let's click done. We've got the interval. We can have that whatever time we want. So if it's a 1 second interval, it'll be very slow, very stilted animation. If it's 100 milliseconds, that's quite fast. And of course, because the walking will be ongoing, we want the animation to loop. So let's have a look. Let's see what we've got. We've got a completely still character, and as soon as I press the left, there you are, he waddles off into the abyss. So that's our first little animation going. A couple of things to clear up on that, though. I wasn't holding down left to do that. I just tapped left, which, it's not great. It means your player can never stop as soon as you press one of the direction buttons. We need to handle what happens when we release left. So if I go to controller and on A button pressed, we don't want A button, we're talking about the left button. And we don't want pressed because we've already got pressed. We want what happens when it's released. So drop down menu next to pressed, change it to released. So in here we should handle what happens when you stop wanting your player to go left. And the nicest, easiest way to do that is, well, we need to set the x velocity to 0 because we don't want them going any more left. So luckily, we've already got that block. I could just duplicate that. So set player sprite velocity x to 0. I'm going to change that 0 there. Sorry, change that -50 to a 0. And there's one other thing we need to do. We need to stop the animation. Because otherwise, your little fellow is going to be running along in place. And it's going to look a bit silly. And one way we can do that is we can go to animation. And if we scroll down, we can actually stop all animations on my sprite. Okay, and then my sprite doesn't exist. We want player sprite. So I'll press play and see what happens when we stop pressing left. And I'll try and announce my movements as well. So I'm going to press left now. I'm going to stop left. And he stops. Let me reset that. So press left, stop. Press left, stop. Press left, stop. And every time I press left, it's got a nice little animation there. Looks quite cool. Right. So you can imagine the right direction will be pretty much exactly the same. So to do right, I got to duplicate both of these and do a little bit of fiddling. So duplicate the on left pressed, and we're going to change that to on right pressed. And because we're going right this time, that means we all need a positive x velocity. So at the moment we had -50 to go left. We want to go right, so 50. And of course we need to update all the animation frames, because otherwise what's going to happen? Well, we are going to be moonwalking, which as fun as that'll look, it's not right, is it? So let's go gallery. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to find the one where they walk right, hero walk side right 1. Put it in the first frame. Go to the second frame, gallery. Hero walk side right 2. Next frame, gallery. Hero walk side right 3. Last frame, gallery. Hero walk side right 4. Now I could have animated that myself, but you know, who's got that amount of time in the day? Okay, so we got walking right. We also need to handle what happens when you stop walking right. So on the left released, I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to change it to on right released. And we don't need to change any code for that because it'll work just the same. Okay, so I've got my player. Now I can walk left. Now I can walk right. Now left, right, and so on. It's a nice little animation. And there we are. So that is the first part of what I wanted to show you today. How to add some nice little animations to your game. Now we come on to the second advanced technique. And that's images. And you may think, oh, we've dealt with images before. We've done lots with them. But we haven't done anything that really drills down into what an image is when it comes to MakeCode Arcade. So, let's think about what we're going to do. Let's say we want to add a nice background here. So how would we do that? Well, first things first, we would go to the onStart function, and we would go to scene, and we're going to set the background image to something. But the trouble with the background image is the background image is huge. It's the same size as this screen. It's 160 by 120 pixels. So 160 pixels across, 120 pixels down. Trying to fill that in using the default MakeCode Arcade editor is horrible. Because this editor is a little bit buggy, and I'm not so keen on it. I want to use an editor that I'm happy with. I want to use something external. And the question is, how can we get an external image into MakeCode Arcade? We can't copy and paste. There's no right click here. There's no Control V. It just doesn't work. How can we get something in here that we've made somewhere else? Well, to explain that, I'm going to leave my browser and I'm going to go to a different piece of software where I have made something else. So let me add a background so I can actually make this a little bit clearer. This is paint.net. It's basically Paint, but with a little bit more. It's like Photoshop, basically. So here's a background that I want to load into my game. How can I get this from paint.net into MakeCode Arcade? Well, the true story behind images in MakeCode Arcade is they're lies. Complete and utter lies. The fact is that MakeCode Arcade doesn't support images. It just makes them up. What do I mean? Well, if we click on the JavaScript option at the top to switch over into JavaScript mode, we can see that we've got a load of gubbins here. There's our controller left. We've got our controller right. What am I looking for? I'm looking for... Alright, right, so down here at the bottom, this is the equivalent of where we create the player sprite. So this one at the top, sprite, sprite facing forward of kind player. Well, in the JavaScript, it's player sprite equals sprites.create and then image and then ... And what's actually happening here is if we click this little expander icon, we can see our image is actually just a bunch of text. It's a bunch of full stops and Fs and 2s and Es and 4s and Bs and so on. And that's all the image is. The F represents a black pixel. The 2, what does that represent? A 2 represents a red pixel. So, sorry, I should show that off. To get to that, in the code, I click this little palette icon next to where the sprite is created. So, we see here we've got blank pixel, blank pixel, blank pixel, blank pixel, blank pixel, blank pixel, 4 black pixels, then some more, then blanks, then 3 black pixels, 2 red pixels, 3 black pixels, and 3 black pixels, 4 red pixels, 3 black pixels. This is looking at each line of the sprite. So let's double check that matches. Yeah, 4 black pixels, 3 black pixels, 2 red pixels, 3 black pixels, 3 black pixels, 4 red pixels, 3 black pixels. Have I said pixels enough? So, one way we can shove a image that we've downloaded off the internet or we've created ourselves into MakeCode Arcade is if we can somehow turn it into a list of pixels that looks a little bit like this. And there is a tool to do that. There's a special website. That's this one. It's the Arcade Asset tool. I've pasted it in chat. What this website will do is it'll take an image that that's a .png, and it'll turn it into code that will work on MakeCode Arcade. So you can see I've tried a couple of times already. So this circuit background raw.png I made, and then I imported it into this tool, and it made a little box down here that contains a long string of text. And that is the code to load this image into MakeCode Arcade. So let's do that as an example. Let's make a background. So I've gone back to paint.net. You can use whatever service you like. You could use Paint, you could use a website. A good one is photop.com. It's basically Photoshop, but on a website and free. Trouble is, it constantly asks you for cookie permissions, so I could use something like that. I'm going to stick with paint.net because it's what I'm happy with. What I can do is, if I create a new image, 160 by 120 pixels, and then zoom in, I could draw my background here. So let's say I wanted some hills. I can have a nice little... let's get a brush in. What colour to pick? That's tricky, because in MakeCode, if we look at an image, let's say the player sprite, we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've only got 16 colours, and we're only allowed to use those 16 colours, which is very restrictive. I can't add a new colour into these. And so whatever image I make externally has to use these 16 colours. What are those colours? Well, there's actually a list of them from the MakeCode website. So these are the 16 colours that you're allowed to use. You've got transparent, you've got white, red, pink, orange, yellow, teal, light green, blue, cyan, or sky blue, purple. What even is that colour? I don't know. It's weird. And you can see that they've got some hex values next to them, and these values represent the colour. So let's say I want to do a nice green background, some rolling green hills. Well, I can use this green here, which is 78DC52. So let's go back to paint.net and let's type it in the colour. So I've completely forgotten it. Oh, crumbs. What's it? 78DC52. 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 Okay. And, you know, I can whack my paintbrush up. Maybe that's too big. Maybe that's even bigger. 60 will do. Hardness 0. We want to make sure if your photo editor has the option, you want to make sure anti-aliasing is disabled. Anti-aliasing is where it adds extra little pixels where you don't want them. It's very annoying. So let's do some green rolling hills. Okay. And then up again. Okay, let's add some puffy... the background's white, so let's change the background to blue. So let's use the fill tool. And now I need to find out what type of blue does MakeCode Arcade use. So I'm going to go back to that website. And we can see that the blue I want to use is 87F2FF. So let's type that in here, 87F2FF. Okay, let's fill in, turn that. Okay, we got a nice blue background. And let's add some gentle rolling clouds. So back to pen. And I know for a fact that the hex value of white is FF, FF, FF. Because that's... let's go just sort of puffy white clouds. And then, actually, if I turn my pen down... Sorry, this has all gone very Bob Ross all of a sudden. A happy little tree here. A more thin cloud. And then... just on there. Fun fact, if you play the original... what's the name of it? The original Super Mario on the NES, the clouds are the same sprite as the bushes because it's saved on memory. There's your boring fact of the day. Anyway, I've got a little display here. I'm not going to put in any happy little trees. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to save it as, and I'm just going to save it to my desktop. I'm going to make sure it's a .png. Because MakeCode Arcade only likes those. So let's call this clouds.png. Save. Okay. And now I can import this into MakeCode Arcade without having to edit it in the awful MakeCode editor. So let's go to MakeCode. We've got the set background image 2. We don't... yeah, let's leave that. We need to get the text representation of our image into MakeCode. So I'm going to go back to that website, the Arcade Asset tool. Have a look in the chat if you want to use that. I'm going to open up where I saved my... clouds.png, and I'm going to drag it into the asset tool, and we can see now that it's loaded it in. And if we look over here on the right, it's very hard to see because it's a tiny text box, but it has transformed this whole image into text, and the text is const clouds equals image 9999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999. Obviously 9 So we're looking across the first line of the image, and every one of those pixels is blue. So yeah, it's a big load of text. I need to copy all of it. There's a problem though. You might be tempted to use this copy button. However, I think there's a bug in the website because it only copies the first half. So until they fix that, sadly it's a case of having to highlight all of this text. So I'm going to start with my cursor, make sure it's at the very beginning, and I'm going to highlight the whole thing. And I'm just going to hold my mouse over here and we're going to wait for it to highlight. And you know you'll reach the end when you can see it ends in a semicolon. Okay, I'm just going to copy. So right click copy. And then I'm going to head back to MakeCode Arcade. I can't just paste it in here. I need to paste it in JavaScript mode. So JavaScript. I'm going to scroll to the bottom. We've already got the scene .set background image. I don't really want that, so I'm going to go above it to the line above and press enter to give me a bit more space. And it's on this line here that I'm going to paste my new image that I've just imported. So right click. Oh, there's no paste. Okay, no worries. Keyboard commands. Control V. And you should see that it's absolutely dominated your screen with a load of rubbish. But this is actually our clouds image. So it's actually taken that text, the const clouds equals image, and we've got the 9999999 of the blues. And we can scroll down, we can see that the 7 comes in at one point. I believe the 7 is green. Let's find a cloud. Can we find a cloud? It's very hard to see in just a sea of numbers. Oh yeah, the cloud is the ones, because the cloud was white, and white is colour number 1. Yeah, it's a nightmare. If we scroll up to the top where it's defined, we can actually click this little arrow here, which hides it. And if we click the palette icon, we can see that we've managed to successfully import an image into MakeCode, which, wow, that's a nightmare. Okay, let's click done. And let's head back to the safety of blocks, because as much as I like JavaScript and it's fun to write, to be honest, I can't deal with all these images being in text form rather than pixel form. So let's go back to blocks. And as we can see, it's made for us a variable called clouds, and it has loaded in our image. And that was incredibly easy because we were able to do it in a image editor of our choice rather than having to use this very limited one. Okay, so now we've got clouds. We can set the background image to, from variables, clouds. And if we load it up, it's going to take a little bit longer to load each time because that background we loaded was quite large. We can see I've got a nice little background and a character that's hovering in the air, admittedly, but has a nice little walking animation along with it. Okay, let's get this character falling to his death. Or at least falling. Or at least adding some gravity. So what have we got so far? We've got on start. We've got the controls for moving around. We need to get a new space on the board for us to put in a new function. Annoyingly, whenever you open JavaScript, it rearranges everything, which is really annoying. So I'm going to put them down there, but they'll just move again when I'm not looking, because they just want to make my life a pain. But let's skew. We want to add gravity, so we should probably have something that checks whether or not our player is to really do gravity well, you have to have a constant check to see whether the player is falling, or if they are not falling, whether they should be falling. And the easiest way to that is to measure their Y velocity. So Y is up and down. If their Y velocity is less than a certain value, it means that they are not falling enough. They're not falling with gravity enough for the game to simulate gravity properly. So let's simulate gravity. Let's go to game and on game update, because we want to check at every opportunity whether gravity is being applied or not. And we want to say if the player is falling at less than a certain Y velocity, we should actually bump up that Y velocity. So we need an if, and we need to be able to compare the y velocity of the player to a value. So we're going to need a comparator. So in logic, scroll down, and we're going to use the less than comparator. And I'm going to put that in my if. And we need to grab the y velocity of the player. So one way to do that is to go to sprites. And where it says my sprite x, that can represent a lot of things. It can also represent velocity. So I'm going to plonk my sprite x in there. I'm going to change it though to player sprite. And we're not going to measure the player's x value. We're going to measure, I've got lots of different things to measure. I'm going to measure its y velocity, velocity y. And I'm going to say, basically, if you are not falling at 200 miles per second, or 200 pixels per second in this case, so if you are moving less than 200 pixels downwards, we need to add more onto that. So how can we add more onto velocity of y? We go to sprites. We can change my sprite x by a number. My sprite doesn't exist, so change it to player sprite. And we don't want to change its x, we want to change its y velocity. And we want to change it by, let's pick a smallish number like 10. So basically all this is doing is saying if your player is falling slower than 200 pixels per second, then make them fall faster. So essentially 200 becomes the terminal velocity of the player, and the 10 here represents how fast they fall. So it's difficult to explain without showing it, so let me just show it. And I'm going to restart the game. And as soon as we see our player spawn in, we should see that they fall to their death. Ooh, there they go. And again, and again. Okay, let's stop that. It's a bit mean. So we now have our player falling. Brilliant. How do we now make it a platformer? How do we add that little bit of, well, gameplay that's essential to make a game and not an interactive piece of art? Let's make some platforms. So the easiest way to do that, we're going to keep the background, which is this nice clouds, but we're going to add to the black background some tiles. And to do that, I need a tile map. So let's go scene. Let's go scroll down to tiles. We can set tile map to blank. So set tile map to, and here we can edit the tile map. Now, I only want this to take place on one screen, so I really need a tile map. Just save on memory and RAM. I want a tile map that doesn't take up more than one screen. And it's important to know that each tile is 16 pixels wide by 16 pixels tall. So if we look at our screen size for the simulator, for the actual console itself, we know that it's 160 pixels across by 120 pixels down. So using a little bit of maths, we need to work out how many lots of 16 can fit in 160. And that'll be how wide the screen is. So how many lots of 16 in 160? That's going to be 10. So I need this to be 10 tiles wide. So I'm going to go down to the bottom left. I'm going to change that to a 10. Okay. Now, in terms of height, How many lots of 16 can fit in 120? Oh, that's a little bit more difficult. It's not a nice round number. So I'm going to say 8 lots of 16, which will be 80 plus 8 times 6 is... I'm just going to guess it's 8. Oh, that didn't work. So 10 by 8. That looks about right to me. It looks right. That's all I need. Whoever told you need maths, they're lying. Anyway, this, if I've got my calculations correct, should be exactly 1 screen's worth of tiles. So I can go ahead and decorate that. I'm not going to put a border on it this time, actually. Because we've already got a background. We don't really need to add anything to it. We just need something to stand on. So I'm going to have a look through the tiles, or create my own. But for sake ease of use, I'm just going to look through the pre-made tiles and find a nice sort of platform tile. So I could use this blob of grass. Yeah, that'll do fine. I could start drawing out some platforms. Make a nice little platformer here. Okay, let's do it a bit like the first level of Mario. So let's put a gap in there, just a small gap. And perhaps we need a block as well. Yeah, a block would be nice. You know, a block to punch up and hit. So let's go miscellaneous, and I usually use these buttons because they're the closest thing to a block. I think there's a chest in there somewhere as well that can be used. Yeah, chest might work better actually. Yeah, let's stick a chest in. So we've got green blocks and a chest. Now, to stop the player basically sliding straight through them, we should probably make them solid. And how can we make them solid? Well, we need to turn them into walls. So if I go over here on to the left, use this sort of 3D wall-looking tool, I can actually paint these red. And you can't see the red, but it just shows that they are solid and the player can't slip through them accidentally. So of course I'm going to leave that gap blank. Let's click done. And let's look at what the simulator looks like now. And there we are. Without doing any code, because we added the walls in, we've automatically got a nice solid base to stand on. And a floating chest, which looks a little odd, but we can fix that. What do I need now? Well, I need a jump, because otherwise, how am I going to get over this gap? I'm not. I'm just going to fall down here and then walk off. Oh no, I'm trapped. Oh dear. Whoops. Anyway, let's add a jump in next. What else can we have? Okay, so to add a jump, we need a control. So if we go to controller, on A button pressed, A button's a good one for jump. For some reason, Nintendo like B to be jump. It always confuses me. You're playing on the PlayStation or Xbox, and as soon as you move to a Nintendo console, you try pressing A, and it does the exact opposite thing to what you expected. It's so annoying. Give me X or circle or whatever the other ones are, any time of the day. Anyway, so on the A button press, we want to jump. So what is jumping? Well, jumping is fighting against gravity. And what represents our gravity? Well, if you look over on the on-game update, you can see that gravity is represented by Y velocity. So we need to do a Y velocity in the opposite direction. Gravity is Y velocity going down. We need Y velocity going up. So I'm going to go to on a pressed. I need to set the velocity. So let's find velocity in sprites. We don't want to set velocity to Vx, Vy, because that would also change the X velocity, which wouldn't work. It means that whenever you jumped, you wouldn't be able to move sideways. Which, well, it makes leaping over that gap quite difficult. So instead, we're going to go to set my sprite X to 0. And of course, my sprite doesn't exist, so change that to player sprite. X doesn't exist, so change that to... No, what am I talking about? Oh, I've gone mad. X does exist. Ignore me. X does exist, but we want that to be Y velocity. And in here, we need to put a minus number that represents the power of our jump. If we make it too small, as in a larger minus number, it's like opposite day. So if I were to put it in minus 500,000, then they would leap off the screen and basically never come down because that's too much. I'm going to just play it safe. I'm going to put minus 100 for now, and we can tweak that later if we want to change how our gameplay feels. So if I go here, move side to side as usual. Let's press A to jump, but if you're building this on a computer, you can use the spacebar and the keyboard. So A. Oh, there we are. A nice little, very tiny jump. Let's see if we can make it over the gap. Yeah, there we are. But we can't reach the chest. Okay, so we're either going to have to tweak our jump value. Oh, hang on. I think we've got an issue here. Yeah, so we'll need something that stops them jumping when they're not allowed to jump. Because otherwise you could just tap A constantly and fly. Which, if you want to make a Flappy Bird clone, that's fine. But it's not great, is it? So, best way to deal with that is we'll probably need a variable that stores whether or not they're allowed to jump again. So let's go to variables. Let's create a variable, and we're going to call this can jump. So the first thing we want to do, we want it so that when they jump, they're not allowed to jump again. So we need to update can jump to false. So can jump is set can jump. Really weird phrase, that can jump. Maybe, yeah. I don't know, it's throwing me weird. Anyway, set can jump to, well, we want that to be false. We want this to be in Boolean, which is in logic, false. So they are not allowed to jump after they've immediately pressed jump. Okay, so it sets can jump to false. How do we get it so it's true again? Well, it should probably be true if they're on the ground, if they are touching the ground. So what's the best way to do that? I mean, there are two ways. One way we can do it is we can check whether or not the player is hitting a wall. It is if there's a wall underneath the player, if there's a solid object underneath the player. So if there's a solid object underneath you, you can jump again, basically. And one way to do that is if we go to... Oh, well, we'll need to do this in our on-game update. We've already got our on-game update. We'll need another if statement, so I'm going to pop that underneath. And in this if statement, I'm going to ask, if there is a wall underneath me, then I can update the can jump to true. So let's go scene. Let's scroll down. Where are we? Oh, I've lost it. There we go. We've got in the collision section of scene, is my sprite hitting wall left? Well, it's useless to us now, but with a little bit of tweaking, let's grab that. Change that to player sprite. And we don't want hitting wall left, we want hitting wall bottom. So if the ground is beneath me, then I can set can jump to true. So variables, set can jump to 0. But let's replace that 0 with true, which we get in logic. Logic, scroll down to the bottom, true. Wait for that to update. There we are. So I haven't tested this. In fact, I only discovered the jumping bug a second ago, but let's see. Can jump. Oh. Okay, what's going on here? Oh, I forgot to check. Oh, silly me. We need to check whether can jump is true or false before we jump, don't we? Oh, I'm a numpty. So, back in the on A button pressed, I need to say if can jump is true, then jump, otherwise don't. So, logic, if, and I'm going to put it in at the top, but just temporarily. I'm going to move the other stuff in when I've got a moment. We need to compare can jump to true or false. So let's get a comparison from logic. And a comparison between true and false is equals, because you can't have less than true. So we need to say if can jump equals true, so variables can jump goes in the left of the comparison, logic true. If can jump equals true, then now we can jump. So now we can set the velocity, and then after that's done, set can jump to false again. So with that check in place, hopefully, unless I've screwed up, we should have a nice little jump. And can we do multiple jumps? No, we can't. We can't fly anymore, no matter how much I mash that spacebar. Okay. So yeah, oh, I've fallen. So, one last thing to clear up before we close up for today. I'm going to update my tile map so that the chest is in a more appropriate position. So I'm going to get the chest again, and I'm going to stick it down a block. I could have updated the jump height to be higher, but I liked the cute little hop he did. It worked well with the animation. Let's add some wall on the chest. And also, let's have it so that when he hits a block, something happens. So if we look back in our on-game update, we've got it if there is a ground underneath them. Well, in Mario, if that's what we're trying to copy, we need to say, what if there's ground above them? Because when you hit a block from underneath a Mario, something fun happens depending on what that block is. So I'm just going to take this second if statement, and I'm just going to duplicate the whole thing. And rather than say if player sprite is hitting a wall on the bottom, we can say if the player sprite is hitting a wall on the top. We're not going to update can jump, but we're going to do something. So if I had more time, we could add in a projectile that comes out of the block, and maybe that's a power-up, or maybe it's some kind of enemy bullet or projectile. or we could have, it trigger something like a switch. But just for now, just as a demonstration, I'm just going to have it play a little sound effect. So music, play sound, ba-ding. Okay. So let's give that a try. We've got a little jump over the gap, and let's see what sound it makes when we hit the chest. Okay, it wasn't very clear because there wasn't much jump space, but let me do that again. Yeah, if I'm hitting the block from below, it makes a ba-ding. Anyway, I hope that has proved useful. We covered a couple of advanced things. Animation, which, that's a nice little extra. Also, importing images. Remember, when importing images, it's important to only use these colors. Or, if you're feeling advanced, you can go back onto the website in chat and you can take a look at updating the palette. The palette lets you use your own colors, which is a fun little extra. It gets a little bit more, a little bit more advanced. That's a good website to take a look at. We can import images using the import tool. And all that aside, we covered adding a little bit of platformer style gravity, which worked quite nicely. And if this kind of thing interests you, remember that there are 2 game development sessions running on the 27th and 29th of October for half term. I recommend going ahead and signing up now. And of course they are free, and they're a nice little intro to game design from a more, from a more industry angle. So what's really like to be a game developer. And of course, if that is not enough, there are also, when I can find them, which I can't, we also have our TechnoClubs, which will be starting in November. These are very much like our live streams, just with longer projects that are a lot more involved, and we get to do much more fun stuff. And also, the live streams will be getting an update. So, look out for a new live stream style on 2nd November. Well, sorry, on the week starting 2nd November. So then onwards, and I hope to see you in half term and so on. Enjoy the rest of October.